I would never have chosen this cross for myself. My biggest struggle through this season has been loneliness. My absolute worst nightmare came to reality. Pastor Resources asked me to share my story. My name is Davey Blackburn, and I'm the lead pastor of Resonate Church, located in Indianapolis, Indiana. I guess my story starts with Amanda and I feeling this calling to start a church that would bring life to a major metropolitan city. And so we felt called to move to Indianapolis out of a very comfortable position at New Spring Church. We loved everything we were doing under Pastor Perry Noble, but man, we just couldn't shake this idea of moving to Indianapolis and starting a church. And so after about 8 months of praying against it, the Lord made it super clear to us, as clear as I've ever felt the Lord's calling. He made it clear that we were supposed to move and start this church. And so we got up on the ground about 2012, January of 2012. And since then, it's been quite a process. Anybody who's started a church knows that it is not for the faint of heart. And if I could tell anybody who wants to start a church, if they could do anything else with their life, to do that, because starting a church is very difficult. You kind of feel like you're being dropped in the middle of a parking lot and told to plant a forest, and it's just tilling up a lot of soil. It's just building lots of relationships. And so over the course of 3 years, we saw a lot of slow growth or no growth. Through the whole process, we just knew and were determined that God had called us to do this. And so we just fell back on our calling as to what kept us in the game. And about August of 2015, we started seeing some actual traction and some growth. We thought maybe this was like, man, this is the upside. We're starting to click on all cylinders. And then November 10th, a Tuesday morning of this past year, 2015, I came home from the gym and found my wife laying unconscious on the floor of our living room, and rushed her to the hospital. Our 15-month-old was fine. He was up in his crib, but we rushed her to the hospital and found out that she had 3 bullet wounds, and 1 was in the head, and that it looked very, very, very grim. And so I found out while I was at the hospital that there had actually been a home invasion in our house. And so I was just in complete shock. I had no idea what had just happened and what any of this meant. And so it was startling, to say the least. I mean, I think that would be an understatement. But even laying beside her hospital bed that Tuesday afternoon, I was with her sister, and I put Pandora radio on her bed, just on a phone by her bed, and the very first song that came on just randomly through this Pandora radio was the song "Nothing Is Wasted" by Elevation Worship. And it's like the Lord came down in that moment and just reminded us that nothing was going to be wasted out of this. And so we were praying for a miracle. I was praying that God would heal her somehow, that it would be completely baffling to the doctors how she was healed, because they were giving us a very grim prognosis. And so we thought that the Lord wanted to do a revival in the hospital there by healing her, but unfortunately the Lord chose to heal her a different way. He took her home about 24 hours later. And so what I thought was supposed to be a revival in the hospital, now I'm seeing is a revival across our city and a revival across our nation, because God is sticking to His promises in Romans 8:28 about the fact that He works all things together for the good of those who love Him, who've been called according to His purposes. And we're seeing this story in Amanda's life and her death not be wasted. Just got a story from a kid who knew Amanda in high school, and he ended up going down a very bad road of drug-related, gang-related activities. He's in a prison in California, and he wrote into our family and said, "When I saw Amanda's story on the news, I gave my life to Jesus." And so I'm constantly every day being reminded that in our pain, God brings purpose, and that He restores and He redeems. And even in the most tragic of moments, I'm being reminded that the Lord can take that tragedy and He can turn it into triumph. My biggest struggle through this season has been loneliness, because for me, I lost my life partner, my best friend, my ministry partner, my lover, all of those things. And there's so many different facets of who Amanda was for me that now that's gone. And there's so many times I just feel very alone. And what I'm having to lean into is the truth that the Lord fills every single void in my heart. And even though sometimes it's really hard to imagine, like, Lord, how are you going to be my wife? You know, like, how are you going to be that for me? I still have to lean into that truth of, hey, will you be that for me? Will you be my comforter in times that I'm just feeling really in despair? Will you be my companion in times I feel really lonely? I just finished reading a book called Leadership Pain by Samuel Chand. And one of the things he talks about in that book tremendously helped me. And that is that the degree in which you're able to endure pain and walk through pain faithfully is the degree in which you will have an impact in this world, and you'll be effective for the kingdom. You know, you think about the person who endured probably the most pain ever in history, and that's Jesus, but it was for the joy set before him that he endured the cross, right? Because of the glory that was going to be experienced through the sacrifice that he made. And so, same idea, and that transformed my thought process when it came to walking through this season. Because honestly, what I want to do is I want to crawl into a hole and crawl into my despair and give up on this whole thing. I want to grow bitter. I want to grow. I want to just throw my hands up and I'm done, tapped out. I don't have anything left to give. But I think God works in those weak moments and shows Himself strong. And I'm recognizing that as I just lean into the Lord and let Him do what He wants to do in me through my pain, and then let Him do what He wants to do through me, through my pain, that I begin to see the picture of purpose that He has for my pain. And so that's been the biggest thing that's encouraged me through this whole process, is that God actually is working through and despite my pain to paint this really beautiful picture of His kingdom. And that's what keeps me going every day. I would never have chosen this cross for myself, but we don't really get the option to choose which cross we're going to carry. We just have the choice on whether or not we're going to carry the one the Lord puts in front of us. And I think that, and I know that God's going to do something really great in each pastor's life that chooses, in the midst of whatever I'm going through, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to be faithful to the Lord, and He's going to take care of the fruit. He's going to take care of that harvest.